And most of your subconscious mind, 95% of it, in fact, is shaped by the age of 7, which is insane. So a lot of times we have these things happen to us, whether it's your parents getting divorced or you getting called a name at school or you getting picked last in PE or any of these things that seem trivial at the time, they linger and they create different narratives and stories in your life. So the more that you can identify what those isolated events are, and then from that, like, what was the story? Or
Caution. Listening to this podcast may motivate you to make positive changes in your life, identify ways to accelerate your career trajectory, and develop a path towards financial freedom. This is the Career Meets World podcast, and I'm your host, Edward Gorbis, and I've spent the last 10 years focused on helping thousands of people advance their career while in parallel teaching a secret recipe to reach financial independence. And I'm here to share the untold stories of successful people and teach thousands of listeners how to develop a growth mindset. Our minds are malleable, and everyone has the power to change their mindset through perseverance, dedication, and a passion for learning. So if you're ready to skyrocket your business and financial literacy, turn up the volume and let's dive right in. This is the Career Meets World podcast. Welcome back, podcast family. Happy 2021. We are about to have an incredible year. We're going to have a plethora of guests with us who will share knowledge about so many inspiring and incredible topics that stem from your career, life, growth, health. And to kick off the year, I thought it was incredibly important to talk about health and talk about how to get our mind and body straight. So to do that, I brought on one of my closest friends. His name is Jeremy Abramson, and we unpack a great deal today. As one of the foremost advocates of touching lives, Jeremy Abramson has taken upon himself to inspire millions globally. He's a wellness coach for men. He has an incredible podcast called Thrive University and is well known for his speaking engagements. In this conversation, Jeremy and I talk about our past, our present, and future. Jeremy reveals how to navigate our self-limiting beliefs, unpacks the myths behind psilocybin, and how to live an authentic life. I invite you to turn up the volume and dive into this episode. Welcome, everybody. I'm super excited to connect with one of my close friends, Jeremy Abramson. I think it's important to share with everyone how we know each other, our background. We're going to get into some deep stuff, but first and foremost, I think the most important thing is many people may or may not know Jeremy, his background. Many people might not know my background. But we're going to divulge and be open and answer any questions that we can about a lot of different topics. Both of us reconnected this year through 2020 in the midst of the pandemic, and it's probably been one of the biggest blessings is to find people from our past, rediscover what they're doing, what they're kind of sharing with the world, what their gift is. And to be very candid, and by no surprise, Jeremy was somebody that inspired me to focus on my health, focus on my passions, focus on what I care about. And this was probably in the June timeframe when we started chatting again. I'm so grateful that you're back in the Bay Area. So without further ado, Jeremy, thank you so much for doing this today. How are you?
brother, thanks for coming through to my casa. So we're in my office right now, and I'm doing well, man. Doing super well. We're recording this, and there's 2 weeks left in 2020. So as I was telling you before, really just using this time to reflect on the previous 12 months, see what's been working well, what maybe hasn't been working well, what tweaks and improvements I want to make moving forward into 2021. And yeah, it has been a big blessing, and just really continuing to cultivate that clarity moving forward. So It's been a beautiful journey, and I'm excited for what 2021 has in store for us.
And it has a lot in store for us. I think as you and I talked a lot about what happened in 2020, political events, socioeconomic events, social events, there's a lot of suffering in the world. There's a lot of pain and there's a lot of resistance.
Mhm.
So I know you and I have talked about this. Obviously, a calendar year is simply what humans have created as a figment of our imagination. It's a time frame. But what would be your recommendation for people who are thinking about 2021, how to master the year, how to really have great accomplishments and not repeat maybe what happened to them personally during 2020? How do you approach the year and what are your recommendations for people?
Yeah, for sure. So I think always doing an audit of ourselves and just being extremely honest with how we've been showing up in the world in all areas. I always, one of the things that I do with myself and also my clients is I have them evaluate the 5 F's of their life. And those F's are fitness, which is everything health and wellness, finances, which is everything money and career, faith, which is everything spirituality and connectedness to source, the universe, whatever you want to call it. Fun, how much fun are you having in your life? And then also the last one is, why am I blanking? It'll come to me. I don't know why I'm blanking. But, anyways, getting clear, like, where would you rank yourself in each of these categories? Like finances, fitness, fun, uh, faith. Where would you rank yourself? Family is the last one, and family encompasses not just your direct bloodline, but also your friends and your relationships. So where would you rank yourself right now? One being very bad and challenged, and 5 being thrive. You're thriving in that area. And be honest with yourself. Are you a 3, a 4, a 5, a 2, a 1? And get clear with what a 5 looks like. I think a lot of times people have these huge ambitions and goals and visions for the world, but they never actually get clear on what that looks like. What does a 5 look like for you in your relationships? And once you can kind of do that audit and get clear on that, I think it puts you in position to take actions that are going to get you towards that number. And then I would piggyback that by saying, in terms of goal setting, I'm really big on this system that I kind of co-created, but it's also an idea I got from a book called The Four Disciplines, and it's called WIGS, right? Wildly Important Goals. And rather than making 5 or 10 goals, right? Get clear on like 2 or 3 things that you want to focus on. And this works for individuals, this works for entrepreneurs, businesses, getting your team aligned with 2 or 3 wildly important goals that are going to move the needle on where you want to go. And that requires you figuring out where you're at now, where you want to go, and give yourself a time frame. So a very basic example of this would be, hey, I want to go from 180 pounds to 165 pounds by March 31st, 2021. And then once you have that wig, you figure out, hey, what are the lead measures that I need to focus on that are really going to move the needle? Because oftentimes, you've been in that corporate America setting, right? Like a lot of times we're so focused on lag measures, which is our wig essentially. And we're not necessarily focused on the actionable items that are going to get us there. And what I mean by that is very simply using that same example, losing 15 pounds by March 31st, 2021. Okay, I'm going to wake up every morning and go for a 20-minute walk. Boom, that's one of my lead measures. Number 2, I'm going to drink at least 80 ounces of fresh spring water every day. Boom. Number 3, I'm not going to eat past 7 p.m. All of those things are 100% in your control, and they're going to directly influence your WIC. So when it comes to goal setting, I think a lot of people have trouble like narrowing things down and actually figuring out like what are the actionable steps. I call these your unconditional commitments that you're gonna take action on consistently every day that are gonna help you get there. So we have this big goal, and then we're basically breaking it down into smaller, actionable steps.
I love that. It's so powerful, and you reminded me of a lot of things I personally experienced, as you mentioned, working in corporate America for the last 10 years. We are often taking action, but it's actually more reaction, right? We're reacting to whatever's happening, and we're not even conscious about what action we genuinely want to take and have the impact that we want to have in the world. And it's so detrimental to our well-being, and that's what leads to a state of suffering.
Mm.
I think the work that you and I continuously look at and explore and teach and share with people, I think we're both a student for life as well as a teacher for life. When we look at everything through that lens, we're able to not only generate the action that we want, is to take inventory, as you said, about the things that you actually want to accomplish. So I think having fractional goals and just simplistic, very clear goals is really what's going to get you there. What I know is really important, and part of what I love doing in conversation, and you know this, but I think it's important to share with everyone, is unpacking people's past.
Mhm.
And I'm not here to do psychoanalysis or psychotherapy. I've no experience in that, but what I understand is the value of being in alignment with our past experiences. And because you and I went to high school together, we had an interesting period of our life where we shared together. We played tennis together, fun fact for everyone. And we could talk about who's better back then and now, but aside from that, what I really want to take away and ask you is, when you reflect back on your own experiences, whether it's when we knew each other or even before that, what stands out to you as some of the most powerful things that you learned that you welcome into your life today?
Good question. For sure, good question. I would say honestly, man, the most valuable lessons that I learned when I was younger that are still applicable now are really the things from my parents. I can honestly say there's really nothing that comes to mind from school, whether that be elementary school, middle school, high school, college. And that's not to say I didn't learn anything useful. And it's not to say that I didn't have some great teachers along the way, but there's literally nothing that stands out to me like, oh my gosh, that thing that I learned junior year at University of Oregon in my sports marketing class really has made a positive impact on my life and building my business and building my brand today. Like, I would be lying if I said that there was. So for me, it's really the things that have taken shape the most are just watching my dad, honestly, watching my dad and the way that he kind of operates and operated, while I was a kid. And he was a neurologist for 40 years, and he recently retired this year, actually, January 2020. And I just remember watching him, man, and just being so humble and just being so compassionate. And I'll never forget one day where I went to visit him at work. He was like, I walked in and he was like in the bathroom, like having a conversation. And I was like, Dad, what are you doing? And this is like, the shared bathroom with patients and stuff like that. And he was talking to the janitor in the bathroom, and they were having like a full on conversation. Like they were good friends. And it turned out like they were good friends because my dad literally treated everyone, whether it was a patient, another doctor, the janitor, he treated them all with such love and respect. So I've really done my best to adopt a similar type of approach and mindset. And that's really the thing, amongst others, that my parents have kind of indoctrinated me with that have helped shape me in a positive way.
That's so beautiful, and I appreciate that. What I will say, though, to challenge both of us, because I'll acknowledge that you and I were very, very fortunate that our parents were together, they're loving, they're supportive, and not everyone's afforded that type of environment. And I think what you shared about your dad having this tremendous compassion for people and wanting to care is a really good trait to take away, and one that many of us can aspire to continue to kind of embody in the world. But from your own experience and observing other people and serving some of your clients and all of these different experiences that you've had over the last couple of years, and gaining all this awesome knowledge, what's your advice to people who might not have had the right role models or the experiences that we all crave and seek and love? How do you break through that? How do you build new habits in today's world?
Yeah, it's a good question. Really powerful. And I think everyone, regardless of the way they were brought up or parented, has trauma. I think everyone has trauma to some extent. And my trauma is not going to look the same as yours. And so many people that I've done work with and that I've been on journeys with, the amount of adversity and obstacles that they've overcome at such a young age is insane. And it makes you just wonder, like, oh my gosh, how would I have handled that situation? Whether it's physical abuse, emotional abuse, abandonment, all of these things. So really, to answer your question more directly, I think it's really important to identify what are those events that happened as a child that really helped shape your subconscious mind, right? And most of your subconscious mind, 95% of it, in fact, is shaped by the age of 7, which is insane. So a lot of times we have these things happen to us, whether it's your parents getting divorced or you getting called a name at school or you getting picked last in PE or any of these things that seem trivial at the time. They linger and they create different narratives and stories in your life. So the more that you can identify what those isolated events are, and then from that, like, what was the story or what is the story that you're telling yourself from that event, right? So let's just use your parents getting divorced, because unfortunately, the divorce rate is extremely high, right? So we can talk about that. Your parents get divorced, and likely the story that you're telling yourself is, I'm the reason, I'm the cause of their separation. You could accelerate that and you could say, I'm not worthy of love. My mom and dad, like I'm not good enough to receive love, right? And you can tell yourself all relationships are like this. They all end in separation. They all end in failure. So then you go about every relationship knowing, like, oh, well, this is going to end eventually. So you probably sabotage it intentionally, subconsciously. So the point I'm getting at is that all of these events that happen, they shape our perspective and they shape the stories that we tell ourselves. So if you understand that it is indeed just a story, it's just a story. And yes, maybe you accepted it as a truth, but that story is probably no longer serving you. So I think it really requires a lot of introspection. And 2020 has been a great year for introspection. I think everyone has spent more time alone this year than they had in the previous decade, which is very scary for a lot of people, because now maybe the things they used to distract themselves with, whether it's, going out to the club or, hanging out with a group of friends or you name it, whatever that thing was for them that they were using as an escape. Now it's like, okay, shit, I'm sitting with myself and I'm facing some of my shadows, some of my darkness, and understand that's where all the magic happens, is doing that work. You just have to be willing to do it. And it's not easy. It's not easy because, again, you face a lot of things that maybe you've suppressed in the past. So So it comes back to like being real with yourself and taking an audit and getting clear and building self-awareness. Why are you thinking this way? Why are you acting this way?
So powerful. And
that's
so,
a long-winded answer.
It's an important one. And one of the things that you and I always talk about is the importance of giving yourself permission to do that audit, right? Again, a lot of us are on this hamster wheel of life. We're constantly doing the things and reacting to whatever's happening out in the world in a way that we don't necessarily want. Therefore, we're not getting the results that we want. And if you take a moment to back up, and yes, 2020 has afforded us that, but do it on your own time. Do it because you want to, not because, again, the world is telling you to do it and you're reacting to it. Mm-hmm. It's so important to look at whatever's happening in front of you and ask yourself, is this what I want? Is this the meaning I want to give to this situation in the world? And you'll discover so many unique things through that process. And that's kind of the beauty of going within and understanding who I really want to become. What vision do I have for the world? And that's how you're able to set more intentional goals and narrow it down exactly like you said to those 2 or 3 things.
Yeah. What would you say for you has been the biggest takeaway, the biggest realization you've had about yourself in these last 9 months or so?
It's a really good question. And to simplify it is really around our belief systems and taking inventory of what my beliefs have always been. And the reality is I've gone super deep in understanding how our mind works. And the beauty, as you said, is even though our beliefs are formed in the first 7 years of our lives, we have this incredible opportunity to systematically change the neurosynaptic connections in our brain to rewire and hack your mind. And through this process this year, I've literally been able to do that. I wake up every single morning, whether or not I've gone 6 hours of sleep, 8 hours of sleep, I know what my purpose is, and I know what my new and empowering belief system is. And I've gone through that work. And it's so empowering now because I'm able to wake up to ask myself the right questions, to evoke the right feelings, to have the right thoughts, and then ultimately take purposeful action and get the results that I want. Because I know and I've learned that once we get the results that we want, those results reinforce our new belief system. And then we keep going down this positive rabbit hole that we actually want to go down.
Yeah.
So to me, that's kind of been the most inspirational and life-changing event that's happened in 2020. It's going to continue for the rest of my life. I can't see the world any other way because I know how powerful belief systems are.
Yeah, that feedback loop is now like serving you in a positive way.
Exactly.
Yeah, and a lot of someone listening right now, they might be having that feedback loop that has a sabotaging thought, right, a self-limiting belief, and they keep supporting each other and manifesting and building this bigger story that they can't seem to get out of. So I think that's good that you mentioned that, because basically you're showing and proving that you can create that feedback loop in a way that serves you and fuels you. So that's beautiful, bro.
Exactly. So look, I know we've gone super deep, and to kind of escape from that for a moment, I know that sometimes we need tools in our life to assist us. And again, we all use different tools. We've all been taught to use different tools. One of the most interesting things that is growing and expanding, and there's a bigger conversation around it, is psilocybin. And I know how much you love to talk about this. I know how deep you'd like to go on it. For those of you who don't know, Jeremy has done more financial research on psilocybin companies than anybody I personally know. Obviously, there's many other financial experts out there, but Jeremy, I want to tap into your brain a little bit and divulge and share kind of what you see in the power of psilocybin and what you see as the future of it.
Wow. I'm really glad you're asking that. By the way, those stock tips are going to cost you extra, but it is such a fascinating market, and honestly, I'm so happy to see that these medicines, and someone listening might be like, what do you mean medicine? A lot of times we've been programmed to think that certain things are drugs, certain things are medicines. And again, all of those are just stories. So the biggest thing that I see, first of all, with psilocybin is it comes from nature. You talk about whether it's SSRI or Adderall or Vyvanse or anything else, a blood pressure med, a statin for high cholesterol, these things that are so commonly prescribed in the West. And it's like they're just given out like it's fucking candy. Like, and it's really, don't get me wrong, these drugs, so I call those drugs, right? Because they're really doing unnatural things to our body, our hormones, our physiology, our brain. Those things can save lives in the short term, but they are not long-term solutions. And obviously, there's hundreds of millions and billions of dollars behind these big pharmaceutical companies that keeps them going. And what's beautiful, just to give people a little background about like psilocybin, which is really what I'm the biggest advocate for, because again, it comes from nature, and mushrooms and fungi have been around forever. And humans are actually closer in our buildup to fungi than we are plants. So we are so connected to this medicine. And in the 50s, after World War II, actually, so starting in the 40s, but continuing the 50s and 60s, psilocybin was one of the most researched solutions for PTSD and for depression and for these other really chronic illnesses. And there was so much promise behind it, right? So much promise. And I mean, people may have heard of Timothy O'Leary, who was like a famous professor at Harvard, who basically got shunned and banned because he was an advocate for these medicines. And he saw the power in them. He was a true visionary. But then I think it was 1970, 71, Richard Nixon basically labeled LSD, psilocybin, all of these things, stage one, or I think that's what they're called, stage one narcotics, along with heroin. So all of the research stopped. And basically, with that being said, all of the public perception was like, these are drugs, these are going to damage your brain, they're going to have long-term harmful effects. When in reality, and I'm not going to go over all the science and research because people listening can do that on their own. I mean, there's so much of it at this point, from Johns Hopkins, UCLA, Harvard. The fact of the matter is that there's actually no addictive qualities to psilocybin. There's no harmful side effects. Now, of course, you want to be intentional if you are going to use this in your life, whether it's a bigger dose one time in a therapeutic setting, or you're going to do kind of what I do, microdose, which essentially is a very small amount, 0.25 to 0.5 grams. And I mix it with a couple other medicinal mushrooms, lion's mane and cordyceps, which are really great for neurogeneration, neuroplasticity, and creating those neural connections like you spoke about. And this is honestly like such a beautiful medicine, because it for me and for many others that I've helped kind of get on this path, high levels of creativity, of presence, of focus, connectedness to nature, connectedness to source, and really again, no things like, again, we all have periods of anxiety and depression, right? And moments. But what I think this medicine really helps you access is like the present moment. and the power of that. And you realize like, oh my gosh, like I was so worried or fearful about that thing. But in reality, in the grand scheme of things, there's so much in my life that I have to be grateful for. And there's so much abundance around me. And it's also worth noting before I cut myself off that that psilocybin works on the same serotonin receptors that these SSRIs do. And, I've watched my brother struggle and suffer a lot with mental health and other people around me. And it's been painful. So for me, this was like, there's got to be a better way, because these drugs are just getting people super dependent, right? And then when you try to wean off, you have these terrible withdrawals, and it's really creating this dependency that I think is so unhealthy, and it's not a long-term solution. So long story short, I think people can do the research on a deeper level. They can also message me. You can hit me up on Instagram or LinkedIn at Coach Jeremy 305 with any questions you have, and I'm happy to go deeper with you. But I don't think it's a coincidence that you have some of the biggest investors in the world, like Kevin O'Leary, Peter Thiel, invest tens of millions of dollars into this space, because they're businessmen and they're always looking for an opportunity, but they also see like it's solving a huge problem in the world, right? It's solving this mental health problem that we haven't been able to grasp our hands around, depression, anxiety, PTSD, and all of the suffering that's going on with that. So I'm really encouraged by the progress that we're making, and I'm going to continue investing time, money, resources into this healing modality.
Thank you for sharing that. And if I were to add a disclaimer on the bottle of this advertisement, is that it's important to learn and educate and understand what this is before diving into any sort of medication or getting off any medication, right? Understanding what impact it has on you. So highly, highly recommend connecting with Jeremy. He is true and honest with the power that this has on people. And you're right. Kevin O'Leary pointed out something actually really incredible recently, which was when we look and compare at cannabis versus psilocybin, the difference in why one is taking off, why one is actually getting approved legally across different states and cities, is because it's taking more of that medicinal route rather than the direct-to-consumer route.
Yeah.
So what we're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years is an explosion of companies and growth in what psilocybin actually is able to provide. Because as you said, we live in a society where we simply trust the pharmaceutical companies to tell us what is good and what is bad for us. And if you've taken inventory of anything we just said, is that we have to realize what is good for our own body, for our own mind, the impact it has on us. Do we really need an aspirin? Do we need any other sort of medication? And I'm not discouraging you or telling you what you should or shouldn't be taking, but be mindful of what's actually helping you and just make the decision for yourself about what is really going to empower you to live the life that you actually want to live.
Yeah.
So
I'll piggyback that real quick before we move on. I think what you said is really valuable. And like whatever it is that you're taking, ingesting every day, whether it is an Advil, whether it is coffee, like none of these things inherently are bad, right? You have to understand, however, the reason, the intention of doing this thing, like what problem are you solving? And just like if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a business, you're identifying a lock and you are creating a key to open that lock, to solve a problem. But if you're just going around with a million keys and searching for a lock, like you don't really know what you're addressing. And I see that with, some of the people when I start working with them, some of my students and clients, like they give me this laundry list of things that they're taking, not all like pharmaceuticals, some of them are supplements and things like that. And I always ask them, so like, what's the reason that you're taking this? What's the reason you're taking turmeric capsules? What's the reason you're taking CoQ10? What's the reason you're taking vitamin D gummies? and maybe you should be taking them. I'm not to say you're not, but I just want to know your explanation. Like, I want you to understand that, and I think that's empowering, is when you actually start to build a deeper comprehension for what these things are doing and how they impact your body and your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to make sure we have a little bit of fun, because
I'm having so much fun, bro.
We're going through a lot of deep, important topics.
Right.
And I want to make this lighthearted as well and give people an opportunity to maybe ask some questions. So do you want to see if there's any questions that we have from everyone watching right now?
I'll see right now. I see some questions. Let's see. Who's got questions? Scrolling through. Wow. A lot of people joining, a lot of people watching. Dorothy Jefferson. I knew it was family. Thanks. That's a great list. Family. Okay. So a lot of fun. Okay. What's the difference between knowing your abundance consciously and taking mushrooms to realize it? Is it the actual neuron connections that makes the repairs? So I think this person, Soul Basher, is asking, how do you do you need psilocybin for you to be conscious of the abundance in your life? And my answer to that would be no. But sometimes people are so stuck in these different feedback loops that they're having. So they need to have a pattern interrupt. I think this is one of the most important things that psilocybin can do, is it provides a pattern interrupt to your normal, routine, mundane life. And a pattern interrupt can come in many ways. A pattern interrupt can be going to Yosemite, going to the mountains and just connecting with nature, disconnect from your phone, jump in an ice bath. There's lots of ways to have a pattern interrupt, but I feel like that gives you the possibility to understand things at a different level and perspective. Hopefully that provided some clarity. Awesome.
All right. So, Jeremy, I know you do a lot of reading and studying. What are you reading lately, whether it be books or articles, journals? What's got you focused these days?
Yeah. So what am I reading? I'm reading How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan, which actually goes into the history of psychedelics and talks a lot about the efficacy of them and the current state of them. So I'm studying a lot about that currently. So that's the book that I'm reading, and then I'm always reading a book and then listening to an audiobook. So the audiobook I'm listening to is called Awareness by Anthony DeMello. Really interesting book. I don't necessarily agree with everything in it, but I actually was tempted to stop listening multiple times, and I caught myself and I was like, are you getting triggered because you don't agree with it? And I was like, maybe I am, and maybe this unique perspective will actually give me more tools and keep me more open to learning. So those are a couple things. And then I would say the books that I gift to all of my clients are, number one, The Energy Bus by John Gordon. Number two, The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, which I feel like is a beautiful Bible to operate your life from, and it's a super quick read. And then I'm a huge fan in terms of marketing and business of Seth Godin, and I know he just came out with a new book actually. So This Is Marketing by Seth Godin is really powerful. And then what I've been reading every morning the last month is just really articles on these different companies that are doing work in the psychedelic space. So I really want to make sure, for me, when I'm investing in these companies, what type of leadership do they have? Who's at the helm? And what's their story behind this? Are they just trying to get a quick dollar because it's a trend, or are they actually connected? they suffered with depression or PTSD, or they had a loved one that suffered with it. So I'm really getting clear with like what companies I want to align with. And then like what is their healing modality? Are they healing, for instance, this one that I'm really loving that I want to invest in is targeting fibromyalgia, which is super unique. And for anyone who knows, like it's something that is really devastating. I think there's about 5 million people in the US with fibromyalgia, but basically you lose all strength in your muscles and your body is basically decaying. So if they can create some sort of solution and healing modality for that, I mean, it's really, really powerful. So that's kind of right now where I'm putting a lot of my education.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So as I typically do on my own podcast, I love putting people on the hot seat.
Yeah.
And asking you a couple of different questions that are unique and specific to you. So I got to ask you, are you ready for the hot seat?
I'm fucking ready. Can I say that?
You can say it.
All right, I'm ready. Let's go. Hot seat time.
Let's do this. So we're going to give you 3 questions and then you get to ask me one at the end. So let's do this. Jeremy, if you and I were to drive to LA right now and strip off the Hollywood sign and you had an opportunity to write a message to the world instead of the Hollywood sign, what would you put up there?
Ooh. Oh my gosh. I did not think we were going there, man. This seat is getting hot.
I feel like I need a shot clock.
Just because this is fresh in my mind and I made a post about it today, I would just have the question, what's the worst thing that can happen? So basically, you know, a lot of us, we experience fear, anxiety, overwhelm, and we let that fear manipulate us and basically rule our reality. And if you just stopped and paused and asked yourself, what's the worst thing that can happen if I leave this job, if I start this business, if I move to another city? And you realize like, wow, I mean, it's really not that devastating if things go wrong. You know, the worst thing you can ask yourself at the end of your life is what if? Like, what if I didn't do that? What if I did try that? And I think it'll supply people with a good question to think about. So I would have, what's the worst thing that can happen with a big old question mark?
I love that. I feel like it's a summary of our whole conversation right now.
Yeah.
So question number 2 for you is, if you could spend an entire day with any athlete in the world, who would it be and why?
They have to be living, yeah?
Either.
Wow. Any athlete in the world. Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh. That's going to be really challenging. I would say that, man, there's a couple that come to mind, and there's actually pictures of them in my room as we look around. So I'm fascinated by athletes who had to face a ton of adversity and challenge, and because like that's just such a different level of scrutiny. It's like, okay, if you're getting criticized for the way that you're playing or your performance, it's like, okay, well, that can be expected. You know, you're in the public limelight, like you're an athlete, whatever. But people, you know, like Muhammad Ali, who just had this unbelievable confidence, and from all accounts was also like a very humble and kind man, who was very outspoken about different political issues. I'm not saying I agree with everything or disagree. Like I'm not even that clear on everything that he was fighting for and standing against, but just like the courage and the confidence that he operated with, I think is unbelievable. So I think spending a day with him, like in his prime when he's training and just like getting a feel for his mindset would be incredible. And then I would also say the same thing about Michael Jordan and Jackie Robinson. I think it would be so cool to just experience, maybe not cool in Jackie Robinson's case, like, wow, but just kind of getting and being a fly on the wall in some of those experiences, I think would be incredible. And being able to interview them on a podcast would be also very special. Yeah.
It's a tough one.
It's really tough. And I'm glad you asked that, though. It's a really good question. I'll probably have some like really good answers too, like right when we're done recording. But I think anyone who fought adversity, I mean, I could even go to Sandy Koufax. I'm a huge Sandy Koufax fan. And there's a baseball player in World War I, near World War I. There's two, Hank Greenberg and Al Rosen, who were legendary Jewish baseball players. I would have loved to have the opportunity to speak with them.
I love it. Thanks for going so deep on that one. And I encourage anyone listening to try to answer that question for themselves as well. It's more about the why than it is the who. So, final one for you, Jeremy.
Final one. Let's get it.
I know you and I love really good ethnic food.
Yeah.
What's your favorite? And which one would be your last meal in terms of like overall ethnic cuisine? It doesn't have to be an individual meal.
Dude, I really might disappoint you on this. I think if it was my last meal, man, I would have to go like straight up American food. Like I already know what I would have. I would have a lot of sweet potato fries. With some barbecue sauce, some honey mustard, some ranch. I'd have probably a juicy grass-fed beef burger with avocado, maybe some bacon, some chipotle aioli. I really love, like I do love all cuisine. Thai food's amazing. Japanese food, Indian food, Burmese food. All these foods are beautiful in their own right. But if it was my last meal, bro, I'm telling you, like I could be stuffed and full. And if there's sweet potato fries, I'm game. Let's go. We had those amazing fries. They're like garlic type fries at that Greek spot in San Francisco.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So good. Oh my God. I'm salivating already. So, Jeremy, thank you for answering that. You survived. I know those are not easy questions. They're good ones to think about. And again, I'd always encourage people to kind of think through the answers for themselves as well. So Jeremy, you get to ask me one final question.
Yeah, my question for you would be, what are you most excited about in 2021? Is there maybe one specific thing that pops out at you when I ask that?
It's a really good question. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about what I want to narrow my goals down to in 2021, because it's easy to say I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and then go backwards to your ABCs. But for me, it's really about doing speaking engagements. Because I think you and I both have similar and different audiences that we serve. And the reality is the best way to convey our message and the gift and the service that we want to share with the world is through reaching a wider audience. So next year, it's all about kind of connecting with new audiences, whether it's through corporations, events, conferences, and getting the message out there around when we develop an unbreakable mindset and do the work ourselves, we literally unleash our full potential. So that's what I'm most excited about for next year. It's a journey I can't wait for, but we still have time left in this year. There's so much for us to accomplish and prepare and make sure that we're in a great position to succeed. And I think as we kind of wrap up, what I'll say is that as you're listening, understand that everything Jeremy and I do, how we operate through life, is through curiosity. And we care about learning, we care about expanding, we care about growing, we care about awareness, and that all is rooted in deep curiosity and interest to want to improve. So I welcome everyone to ask yourself, how are you going to improve in 2021? What action are you going to take? Who do you want to support? How do you want to improve your life?
Yeah. It all comes down to what we spoke about, I think, at the beginning of the conversation was really getting clear with where you're at now.
Yeah.
Because you can't figure out where you want to go if you don't really know where you're at. So getting clear with those things, I always say go all in on your strengths. Like so oftentimes we just dwell on like our shortcomings or maybe the areas we perceive that we're weak at, but like fuck that, man. Focus on your superpowers and your strengths and go all in on those things. Like that is your uniqueness and you need to leverage that.
Absolutely. Jeremy, super fun. Thank you for everyone who watched live. Deeply appreciated. And we wish you a super powerful 2021.
Let's get it.
All right.
And also, I'll finish off. If anyone wants to continue the conversation about, microdosing or mindset, neuroscience or coaching or anything like that, if you want any support, just reach out to me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Coach Jeremy 305. I also have a podcast, the Thrive University podcast, because, as Eddie and I were talking and he asked me about, what's the lesson you learned in your upbringing in school? I feel like so many of us have invested so much time and money into school, but we never really learned the lessons that are applicable to our life today. So with Thrive University, I wanted to create something where people felt empowered and inspired to live their happiest and healthiest life. So I would love to continue the conversation. Shoot me a message there. I'm sure Eddie's going to link to those things in the show notes. And much love, everybody.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, for doing this. I appreciate you sharing that. Make sure to connect with Jeremy. He is a legend. He's kind, he's caring, he's supportive, and he's a wealth of knowledge. So, Jeremy Abramson, everyone, thank you so much. And as I always love to say, go unleash your wildest potential.
Go do it.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Career Meets World podcast. I would love to get to meet you. There are a couple of ways we can connect. I love my LinkedIn. Simply search for Career Meets World or Edward Gorbis and feel free to connect. Second is via Instagram at Career Meets World. And third is through our website. I have a special spot for you full of fun, free resources. All you have to do is go to careermeetsworld.com, subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll provide you the free resources to help you boost your career and reach financial freedom. And if this podcast was helpful to you in any way, please consider rating and reviewing this podcast on Apple Podcasts. This helps us help more people. Simply tap the rate with 5 stars and leave a sentence with what you liked about the podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, strengthening your growth mindset is your ticket to success. I'm Edward Gorbis, and we'll catch you on next week's episode.